Okay, hello everybody and welcome to this special recording, which is more about me explaining what I have been doing all this time, all this year, for a seminar which I have partially made. It's about the C++ program made in C++ Builder. It's a cooking recipe manager. You have a cookbook here. It's a Microsoft Access 2003 database, and it contains certain names of recipes and certain amounts of ingredients. Here I have some debug stuff. Here you can see the SQL query, which is generated in order to get from the database the information about the recipe. So if I want to see something, I'm going to go and open up that, and it shows me for that like the test and the later I can change the name to something and change the description. And here are the ingredients. You can see that, and you can edit some numbers for that thing. And I was supposed to make that you could also edit which ingredient that is with which measurement unit, but I didn't get there yet. So it will usually do that stuff, and you will also be able to export as the XML file. However, I had some issues with that, which I'm going to show you, and by doing so I'll also show you what I have been going through in order to explain how that works. So the point is that this window over here is the exact same as this. Hold on a second. This window, no wait, yes, this and this, they are the exact same. And also when you're adding a new ingredient, they're absolutely the same. What's happening is that it is this ingredient inspector over here, which looks like this. This is how it looks like, and it uses the oops, yes, see, this is what happens. This is what has been happening to me all this time. It's caught on camera, the errors. Yes, you hear me right. These errors have been happening to me, and you have no idea how many times I had to destroy my project work just because of this. But okay, it's still running, it's still alive, the heart is still beating there. Alright, so the thing is that all this is a grid, and when you go into the inspector, you can see that I had to use some of my own data structures to make sure there's a purpose of what this window is doing, because I didn't want to do it many times over and over and over again, because that is not how C++ programmers do that. Here is the currently being edited recipe and the currently being edited ingredient, depending on what is being done. And you can see that in the initialization of the thing, depending on how the ingredient inspector was opened it opened with an argument of a recipe being edited or ingredient, it will catch a different initialization. I mean, it's the same function, but it's going to bring these values to different ones. So this sets up the query to select from the ingredients, as you could see over here. This here is basically this query. From this database here, it has these here ingredients. Here is the recipe specification, but over here you can see that it has the foreign keys. I cannot open them up right now because it's all being used. It would not allow me to have access denied. I would have to go all over again. So this is the primary key of this table. This over here is the foreign key of this table, and this here is the foreign key of the primary key of this table. So ingredient collage code, I made it so that I could easily localize the application. So depending on so regardless of whichever language the application was running, it would always show you the identical. It will always function identically on all applications. Does it say cooking chocolate? Does it say chocolate za kuhanje? It doesn't matter. This code over here I have my own specification, how long it can be, what characters can it have, so that way it would go to a DLL file and seek localization, but I didn't make it yet because of these issues which I have caught on camera finally. And you can see here what I made here, that there's an default ingredient quantity unit, but there's also a auxiliary one. For example, cooking chocolate can be measured in ribs, but it could also be measured in the decagrams or whatever. So depending on different recipes, it's gonna be a different thing. But you would like to use the same search engine here. Where is it? Hold on a second. Let's see. Search engine here. So the search engine would allow you to select. Yes, only one ingredient can be at a time. Yes, it tells me that because I'm gonna see. You're gonna see later. I made it tell me that thing. Here you can see it's possible to set criteria. Do you must have that ingredient, or is it like you may have it or that you don't have it? It's like and logic, or logic and not logic for that. And here you would type out the measurement. I made it so that here no matter what you input, no matter how many letters and numbers you try to enter to confuse the thing, you're never going to confuse it. It's always going to put the cursor. I mean, okay, the comma is a bit messy, but yeah, it would still work. So the unit configuration would open up the way that you could choose which unit you want for different things, and these here rows would be localized correctly depending on what you want. So select maximum measure would make sure that criteria says that you don't want to have more, that you don't have more than this much of pudding or sugar or whatever you would like to put there. And this search button would make sure that this over here query gets updated and shows different recipes according to that. Now you can see as I close this window, it will automatically close everything that is tangible to that, because I'm not using pointers, like directly interfacing pointers. Instead, I'm using ownage. I'm using the ownage of components, so that every time one component owns another, that is, let me just search up owner. No, hold on, this. I think I use this. Yes, here it is. So I would pass this, basically the implicit pointer of the main form, to the new form, and then I would place that into an array just to keep track of how many of these windows are being opened. You can see it says 0. I can open up 1, I can open up 2, I can open up as many as I want, and they will all be properly deallocated, because I have made sure that happens over here in the recipe viewer. At every time when it gets deallocated in the close function, let's see, close event, where is it? Where is the close event? Yes, here it is. It will deallocate itself, it will also remove itself from the array, and it will also update that little this thing over here to say how many there are. Here's another important thing. This could not work if I didn't make my own structure here. Here's the structure for the recipe, the title, the author, description, language code. So these are the private parameters, but they also need to be setters, which make sure that you don't enter some name which has like 9,000 characters, pun intended. And here are the properties, which means that you don't have to be typing this accessor stuff, you know, get this, set that. No, you just use this extension, compiler extension from C++ Builder, which will read directly from this, and it will, instead of writing directly to that, it will run this function and pass whatever is being assigned to this into this argument and go to this function. So here it says if the length of the argument is greater than 0 or less or equal to 255, then it is going to set the title. Otherwise, nothing's going to be set. So the same thing is with the author, but with the language code, which is supposed to be implemented so you can know what language this is of the recipe. The language code can either be 3, but it could also be 0 if you want to clear it out, if you don't want it to have the language code. So then you have, like, if you give an invalid thing, it just does nothing. I mean, I could add exceptions, but I didn't have enough time for that because, as I said, I had problems with also debugging and breakpoints and stuff to make sure this works correctly. So writing the icon, there was supposed to be an icon from DLL files that you could load icons for different cake recipes, and each icon would have its own name, and that name would be from a resource DLL file. Now here's how the thing gets initialized, and there's a list, but here's where things get really weird. This list is not your standard C++ list. Many of the C++ standards that I was supposed to be using, that I thought I would be using, are completely thrown out of the window. And that is because this C++ builder uses a completely different library for system stuff, which completely throws everything out of the window that you ever knew about lists. So let's see, tlist. So the tlist, the tlist thing does not show you the stuff that you would usually see. In fact, there are many stuff that you don't even have in the original C++. So how is that possible? Well, I'm going to show some extra stuff here. You can see that there's a get interface entry. There's lots of stuff here, like there's this GUID for this. I have no idea why that even is there in the first place, but you'll see many times it gets to this Delphi. So it turns out this is not C++ as I was told when I was taking this course. This is actually Delphi underneath, and Delphi is not Delphi, it's actually Pascal in some kind of object-oriented abomination, you know, and it's so-called Delphi. And then on top of that you have C++. And most of the objects that you would usually be able to declare locally without a pointer, it doesn't allow you. It will tell you lots of errors which don't give you straightforward information until much later, until you actually know that some of the things are being managed by Delphi and some things are being managed by you. So you never know until you browse a lot of documentation, and some of the documentation is contained in this help file, but some other ones are in another place. So you will never be able to be certain at all times that this is going to work. And also, this is not a dynamic list as you would have in Python or as you would have with the STL library, the standard template library of C++. No, this one is actually an array of pointers. And here's where things get seriously messy with pointers. When you look at different methods, there is the delete one, which removes stuff. Now some of these will remove the thing by actually deallocating what's on the pointer. Some of them will not. Some of them will be handled by Delphi. Some of them will not. I had serious issues. I have lost so much intelligence in my mind. I don't even know what works, what doesn't anymore. What I do know is that for every single thing I have to do, I always have to look up the documentation, because I can never trust my instincts of whatever I have learned from previous stuff, which has seriously been confusing me all this time. But I'm glad I had done it either way. So Unicode string, that's some good add-on. Unicode string here is a definitely good add-on, because many times when you would program C++ stuff, you have all kinds of strings, the constant character star string, like all sorts of stuff. Well, meanwhile in C# you have only one data type. But I hate C# because C# has a garbage collector, while I don't like garbage collectors. I like deallocating things manually, like you can see here where I'm deallocating things manually. So that's how I do things. And here you can also see how I'm writing that stuff also to other data structures, which you're going to see here. Here I have, for the recipe ingredient, all the data types are correctly set. And yes, I did use the XML binding wizard, and yes, I did use the database stuff. However, there has to be a way for the program to be able to edit the thing for its own self, as all editors of, let's say, MP3 tag editor or all those like portable apps programming thingies that some hobbyists, open source, contributors also on GitHub do. They always make things like this. And this is how things are more easily manageable. For example, here, database relation ID, this is how it's much more able to see which entry when I'm editing is being here, which one of these when I'm editing specifically. And here again we have those accessors. Here you can see that not all of them are being accessed through an accessor, because don't need. For example, the description has the I cannot go to the I hope I can go to the design mode. Yes I can. Okay, so it's in creation, so I'm sorry. Speaking of which, also as it's in creation and it does not correlate to 2003 standard, I couldn't figure out what was going on. I could not download the English package because this is the college license, which means that any kind of cracked versions are out of the question. I would violate the license. So here's the long text and here's the short text, like the varchar, and this is the long text. So the long text basically can archive as many characters as you wish, so there's no point of worrying, because this is only limited by how much memory you have in RAM. And over here is the ingredient specification. Again, I made sure that all that is initialized properly, and that if there is no pointers in any of these, then I don't need to have an explicit destructor, but I can use that one default one which the compiler makes. Unlike here, I'm using it because I have to deallocate this stuff here. I have to deallocate the recipe ingredients. So let's see what we have from the inspector. So I was going to the inspector. You can see I'm loading from the database connection, which is one and the same connection over here in the main form. The same database connection. Let's see where it is. Here it is. Yes. Let me see, where did I even put it? It's a complete mess, I know, I'm sorry. Let's see. Okay. So when I open up a database, here is the connection string that I dynamically generate, because I need to be able to get through the dialog of this action from the action list, get the file name, and also get the parameters, and then it's set to connect to true, and it gives me this query, which then sets it to here, so I can manually change it as I wish. And here it makes sure that all the columns are set up properly, because they had issues with aligning them. It was a huge pain. Here it asks me if I want to close the database, for example. If I want to close it down, it will close it. And here is that I have not yet implemented the generating of a new database, which is when I had a huge encounter and a huge conflict with the staff on the Embarcadero. And speaking of the situation of the documentation, that because the GDPR privacy regulation I should not be talking about, the college people know, which has to do with my health. These are the things that have been restoring my health, along with license agreement stuff, like as you can see here, license manager. I don't care what people are gonna say, freedom of speech. I had tons of issues with this. Like, if anyone's gonna sue me, I'm gonna use the freedom of speech. Okay? Don't make me go alright? Good boy. Okay, so let's see. Here we have the action list, which has lots of actions categorized properly, making sure that every one of them has the proper events for being executed, alongside also being updated. For example, you can see here I'm unable to click on this because I don't have any database opened, but when I open, then it gets refreshed here. It gets it stops being a grade. So I have lots of other stuff to implement here, but for each one of them there's a shortcut. There's a nice tidy name in the menu, and the menu items hold the pointers to the, I mean pointers, like, yes, they're technically pointers, or here pointers, which is with red letters, to those actions, so they're all bound to the actions that I don't have to worry. I can access this either from the menu or from the actions. Like I never actually tried this, but I'm gonna try Shift, Control and N. Yes, it works. So I can do this multiple times, as many times as I want. Oops, I hope I don't crash my computer. Yeah. So you can see also it's counting here how many windows I have opened here, and yes, it turns out it does work, even though I thought it was not going to, and I made sure it does. So also the grid is important because I wanted to be able to do this, because I never knew what I could do. Now let's try to type some name. If I try to type a name that's too long, it will reject that. I think this is yeah, it was long enough. It was less than 256, but it gives me a tooltip here in case it is too large. For example, if the window is too small and your monitor is too small, like let's see, egg burger, for example. So it doesn't fit here. You can place the tooltip into update the tooltip when you place the cursor next aside. So it's what's supposed to happen here is that you would select your ingredient. However, check this out. What happens if there is no database? How are you gonna know the definitions? Well, you don't. Instead, you have this button here. Now, this is not a new button. It's the exact same button as. Let me get this out of the way. It's the exact same button as over here, but it gets stretched out because these two get deleted. So all that deletion of stuff happens here, where there are many columns that are being removed. For example, if this is being removed from the main form, because it's most likely the case of the managing the definitions, then you have that situation. So depending on the situation, however it goes, whatever happens, there's always going to be something that's explained. You can see here it says different stuff for units. I also had to worry about this printing format, which was also not standard really. Like I had to use this instead of using the stuff that C Builder was offering, and even then this would behave inconsistently for some reason. But yes, QC, if there's an auxiliary unit, then it shows me this text. If the database is working, it would show the unit from the database, and if there is nothing from there adding on that text, it's unknown. But the point there being is that in the database, for example, you could have a situation that your recipe is let me try to load something from a file here. Loading from here. Actually, a lot of this stuff I couldn't know how to place a new line, but you can see here that here I'm saying command, like that's a piece of something, and I have slug, which I am I had to close this before I can open up the new one. So different ones use different specifications, different definitions of what they want to have for the ingredient type. So for some databases it's going to be that you have chocolate as kilograms, sometimes you have ribs, but when you go to the search engine it should behave consistently, meaning like when you search it generates the SQL query which is going to do that. Now I didn't succeed doing that, but you can see the concept that here the same window, the same one over here gets this stuff removed and this stuff here removed, so you can see only this thing here. This opening and like editing the ingredient, it would make it possible for you to edit the units, like specify some extra more. I had it conceptualized, but then again I had issues with that, as previously said. But you can see for yourself if you think that I was doing this like Kampansky, as you would say. And here the history basically says, let me open up, it says all the way how I've been working. Look at all these sleepless nights, look at all this. See you later. Hold on. Oh, by the way, yes, I didn't tell you. This here, I have been working in MySQL, trying to port the database into Access because Access had other issues. But this was not the first attempt. I also had 2 other versions of this application which I also had some work on since the March of this year, and I had issues appearing there because of bad design and because of lack of some feedback, which I had trouble with. Let's see, this is the manager. Yes, I was looking at the wrong window. So this is the manager, and this here is the book. So this one contains the current project that I was working on for all this time. And speaking of which, I'm not even counting the times where I was not saving the file because I didn't want to compile the thing before it was compilable, because I had times where I would make changes, but I wouldn't be able to revert back to something that works, because some file would work, some file would not. It's a typical issue that happens with programmers, but you can see how with many different iterations I even had to do rollbacks, and at one point I had a failure of files and had to bring them back, and alongside with things crashing I had to do rollbacks which are not seen there. But you can see that with this and with this iteration I had lots of these being done over and over again, and I was working on this for a long time, and that I just could not figure out how dysfunctional this program has been. I don't understand why they made it that way, that you cannot do the standard C++ things that I have been learning since 2012. Why isn't that here? But I'm just going to wrap up with looking up the XML interface, which is generated by the XML binding wizard, which makes it possible that you're able to load this these files as specified. Let me see where I have put them. This XML thing here. You can see here this is how you would type the tag, and you have the title, author, and all that other stuff that you would need. I had to use these tricks to somehow make it that XML will drop into the new line, but unsuccessfully. Here's what the collage icon would be, and these are the ingredient definitions. You would have different, like this one has the default quantity according to the standard, but this is the auxiliary one. So this is according to the pieces, but I think in the ingredient specifications it's in decagrams. You can see it's in decagrams, but over here it is not. It is command. So different recipes will give you different specifications. So it says that 50 of command would be 1 decagram or something. I'm not sure. I think it was kilogram was changing it, but I don't know. So I even tried to make it that I could export the exact same things by using the save functionality in the recipe viewer. Also, I had to make sure that I sanitize a lot of these entries here. Yeah, you can see this is very bodgy. I had to sanitize this a lot. I covered exceptions, I covered advanced forms and simple forms because I simply needed that. I thought I didn't need it. Here I have the message the message box telling me what's going here. I had to have this glue post variable here for some reason to fix some bodgy issue. But either way, if this all succeeds somehow, it displays and shows the form. But if it doesn't, it will make sure to clean up after itself to make sure there's no memory leaks dangling around the place. Same way, here's when you're opening from the database. It uses this query, which was very important for me because it loads on that recipe which is currently selected. It loads exactly that thing. It passes that to the viewer, to the loading of the recipe ingredients over here, and the recipe info that is over here. You can see here it gets all the fields informations, which are then gathered from here onto the recipe object. See, I had to make my own recipe class and the recipe object to make sure it works. And also bound to what? How is it bound? Is it bound by the is it new, or is it from database, or is it from XML? So when I'm saving, I need to know which one of these buttons would be grayed out and which ones wouldn't. So if I'm opening up from the database, I wouldn't be able to say save to XML because the XML file was not even loaded. Likewise, if the database is not even open, these ones would not be even there to begin with. Or if there is a database but it was not open up from the database, this one would be shown, but this would be grayed. So it all depends on how it is placed. And here I had an iteration throughout the fields to make sure that this gets loaded into the object, and then later on at all of this is properly displayed consistently, and at all the things that happen regarding adding or removing things, that the adding or removing happens at object level. The user interface is one thing, that's what the user sees, but behind that is what the program does. So that way, if the user accidentally, I don't know, selects something or removes something from the visual, that it doesn't conflict itself with the actual data structure. So that's why that's what I learned there, which was really important. Now here I have recipe ingredient add via inspector. This over here is the function which is being used to add new ingredient, and you can see there that is where I had to use this abomination. Like, check this out. So what I had to do here, I had to when I'm adding a new recipe, I had to make sure that I go to see all the components of here, to see is there this window, is this window already among them. If it is, then it says only one can be edited at a time, otherwise it creates this. So I had to make sure this works, and this is a very clunky way, because in C++ you would not be using this, you would not be using this stuff, as I was learning in polymorphism. There is a better way to handle this. I don't exactly remember because my mind is full of this new version of C++, this builder, which is never used anywhere else other than here. But you can see here, I'm using the item index to load the exact one, which one it is. Otherwise it will say it's not selected. For example, let me see, if I try to select it, let me see, where is my application? It's not running. Let me open up it. If I click, it says it's not selected, but if I click apply, okay, so I made sure it's addable. Unfortunately, nothing more than that, but it says it wants to edit that. This message box is just for the debugging, so I can know what's happening. The ingredient inspector here knows what has called it, what is its owner, so it knows what to say. So that's why I don't have to be reusing the same stuff all over again, which is a stupid thing I was doing and wasting my own time. Meanwhile, I was ruminating, what if someone says that I'm complicating by putting everything into one form, but also some would say I'm complicated because I'm using multiple forms, like tons of them. But at the same time, this has to be a functional program. And had I not had the health issues that I had, and also the fights at Dookie's server, yes, I said that, this would not have been happening this way, and things would have been much better. And also, had millennials not have been bullied all across the internet simultaneously, many of these projects would have been fulfilled already. And I know that many things are not anyone's problem, but heck, mine problems are not either. But still, I'm doing my job. I'm still doing the stuff. I'm still pushing forward. You can see the database grid is perfectly bound to the data source here, which is bound to the query here, which again for itself does its job. Everything is doing here, and I kinda love doing this. But if only I had a better program than this C++ builder, if only I had much more feedback that I could have students talk about this who would not think that I'm some weird programmer. Like, check this out. So for every button I had to make sure that it checks out Like if it's already 0 in there, then it adds this number only to on top of the 0. So if you have 0, it doesn't say 07, but instead it said 7. So all that had to be done, and also for closing the window. And also here's the validator I had to make. I had to also deactivate this event to prevent recursive calling of the event, which was completely crashing the application and even pumping up tons, and I mean tons of crash logs and memory dumps on my computer, which eventually ended up in clogging the hard drive space, which ended up in some files not being able to be properly saved, which automatically means, yet again, feeling bad and not being able to do this stuff. Because seriously, not being able to tell anyone this because people think it's, you know, weird, you know, that's not humane. Those are not humane requirements. See, this is why programmers are said to have no life. This is why. Because look at what I have to be doing here. So I made sure I saved the cursor's position in the edit box. I made sure that that the text length here is correctly put so I can iterate. And check this out. It counts from 1. How on earth on C++ do arrays of strings count from 1? They count from 0, and this is the only time when I saw in C++ that you had to use 1, and I saw that I was doing something wrong. I had to waste 3 days on solving this stupid issue, all because I did not know that this was counting from 1, because I was told it was counting from 0. The last programming language I was using was Lua, and before that QBasic. Those were the ones who were counting from 1. Other ones normally count from 0, and this is the only one where I have to count from 1. And it behaves inconsistently when it does that for some reason. Like check this out. For example, here I have to, like, I don't even know, but either way I made it so that it somehow makes sure that no bad character enters there. And yes, I have to handle errors to make sure that I don't fully crash my entire computer while doing this. Yes, while the computer is at the same time overheating. What did I not show? I didn't show the search engine here. So this is the search engine, which would also be handling the yes, you can see here, handling the ingredient editing. Like, I want to make sure that it's only 1, because otherwise I would have issues like how here I thought I would have to do this dynamically. But yes, this has been my effort in making this application, and I'm glad something has come out of it. And I wish I could use better tools like Godot engine, for example, which I'm using for making the Crash Bandicoot fan game right now, and I could get hired. So GameChuck, please hire me so that I can get away from this. So if you want to save a life, if you want to save an intelligent brain from being destroyed by this abomination, then please hire me, and I'll greatly contribute to your stuff by some very tidy code and very good environment and time. Because if I travel there where you are, and if I can work there at your workplace, and if I can seek feedback all the time, then I think that issues such as this could be solved like in just 3 days. This whole application so far, 3 days, any one more day it could be finished. Like, I think that so many things that I've been working on always had a problem with feedback and communication with people, which was not an issue of me as a programmer, but simply of people not knowing how to communicate. And I'm not going to be responsible for anyone feeling that I'm zamiering them. I'm not zamiering anyone, and I'm not going to be responsible for anyone being triggered unless they are all responsible for me being triggered. Because equality, #equality. So thank you for watching, and if you don't mind, I'm going to go to take a huge nap. Goodbye.